Welcome, everyone. I apologize, first of all, to everybody that's going to have to stand this whole time. I promise we're going to make it worth it. I hope. I say that. That's a big promise. Everybody feels good, hopefully. Just so everybody knows, there are a couple of seats up front if you're looking to sit down. One here by my friend Kelly. He's from Arbor. He'll let you sit close to him. And then I think you got one more, in here. And then if you can sit here up on the stage with us if you'd like to, you just take your spot. Good morning, though. It's very nice to see everybody. I hope that everybody had good travels in. Hopefully it wasn't, there were no issues on travel. I got in about 48 hours ago, roughly, and I'm feeling it. I've bounced back, I think, a little bit, but I slept for about 11 hours last night. I've got 2 little kids at home, so that's real rare. I think my wife is real mad at me right now. So we're very excited to come to you this morning, though. Josh is from the UK. He's going to tell you about himself here in just a second, but I'll start with me. I head up business development at ArborXR. That includes a lot of our partnerships. That's everything from like the manufacturers to ISVs, there are many of you in this room, to our channel resellers. And then, of course, I meet a lot with our customers because when you work with all those partners, you end up being a glorified glue guy. And you're just trying to solve problems. And that's really what ArborXR is all about. If you don't know about us, we are an MDM for XR devices. We've been around for about 7 years, but it's been an interesting road. The founders of our company started in the LBE space, did arcades and things like that, and figured out they needed to develop a device management platform where they could do content distribution. So that's what they built, and then they realized that there was this huge space in education and enterprise. So they shifted over that way. I came on board about 3 years ago, and just in that time that I've been here, as you all know, like 3 years in the XR industry is like 47 years anywhere else. A lot has changed. There's ups and downs. There's a lot of curveballs that are thrown our way, but what we have tried to fit, the gap we try to fill for you all and for St. James Place and folks like Josh is just solving the problems that make XR difficult to get out to just normal folks. I think that's what a lot of us that are solutions people in this room, that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to make it a little easier for people to understand the magic of XR. And for us, that means device management, content distribution, being able to control kiosk modes, things like that, and then data and analytics tracking. So that's what we do. I'm gonna now throw it over to Josh. This talk, by the way, is going to be like kind of a little bit panel interview kind of style, where I'm going to be asking questions, and then Josh is going to go ham and tell you guys a lot of information that's much smarter than what I have. But Josh, why don't you start with just giving us like a minute or two on like who you are, what you do, and then like the team that you're part of at SJP.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just you sort of talking about what ArborXR do, it made me think about how you kind of do a bit of the boring stuff behind the scenes, but it allows all the sexy stuff to happen. I don't know if you really hate me for saying that.
No, it's okay.
Cool. Yeah, so my name's Josh Ellick. So I've worked within St. James's Place for about 4 years now, managing all of their virtual reality and immersive technology offering, especially from a learning context. Prior to working within SJP, I was working in recruitment and had absolutely zero experience of VR whatsoever, at all. So it was really new for me, but I am a massive nerd, and that's taken me really far. But I'm also really love working with people, so I really enjoy actually the whole process of really getting to understand what are the problems that people within the business are facing, what are they facing more at a strategic level, how do we kind of find a thread that kind of marries those two things together, and then, yeah, absolutely, I look at the technology ways of us solving that.
So we're gonna go ahead and we'll shift hard into like the XR stuff, which you all are probably largely here for. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what brought your team to XR? Like, what was it that got you and your team around you interested in even like scoping XR as a technology? What started that?
Gosh, does anyone remember COVID? I hate talking about it, to be perfectly honest, because it just feels like such a like monumental sort of point in our history. But it really was a bit of a catalyst for us to start to look at more digital ways of working. But one of those was, really looking at XR as, well, I'm within learning development, so how can we support people that want more tangible, face-to-face, quite resonant learning experiences, but deliver it in a way that allows them to do it from home. That was the sort of the general premise that kind of got us looking at it. And I guess some of the initial research, I don't want to wax lyrical about all the PwC kind of metrics that we've had before about the emotional connection that learners experience with VR, but it was something that we were researching, and we started to identify some real challenges within our business that then, we thought VR would be, and XR would be a worthwhile solution to explore.
I'll say really fast, just to kind of add to that, is I think we've all like heard the programs that kick up because of COVID, that we're now years removed from that. And then we also all talk quite a bit about like the PwC stats that also about the same time frame, earlier than that, I think. And so again, when I mentioned earlier, I've been in this industry for 3 years, which is like ancient history. Some of you have been in this industry, you've been doing this for like 15 years, which makes you like, whatever that makes you, really old. And so I'm going to apologize to many of you after this, by the way, for that comment. But there's this tendency for us to look back on that. And our goal today is to talk about where those started, some of the problems that Josh ran into along the way, and then kind of how they solved them and some of the what came from that. And really, I'd say this is overall as a goal, I think us as a room after this event, we should be earmarking the things that happened after people were inspired from the PwC things and COVID, and then talk about the actual impacts that came from them so that we can make new narratives and new stories. I think that'd be my challenge for all of you that are in the industry with me, is let's walk away from this with like new stats, new data that proves that this stuff is working. And hopefully maybe in the next year we'll see a lot more of what we've seen a lot of it over the last few years, absolutely. But I think that Josh's story today will highlight our goal here is to talk about like kind of the nitty gritty a little bit. So I'm going to pull this up in the back, and then Josh, you expound on that. But just so you all can kind of see what we're going to talk through today a little bit, some of the stats and whatnot, some of the things that Josh did. But you go for it.
So I naturally, I just want to sort of start off by saying this is going to be quite an unsexy view of some of the mistakes that we kind of went through when we actually started delivering XR within the business. I mean, when we actually started, we obviously had these like really good sort of initial intent in terms of the real kind of challenges we were looking to solve around more sort of remote working. I think one of the things specifically, so I work within St. James's Place, we're the largest wealth management company in the UK, and we have a lot of financial advisors that come through an academy program to train to become a financial advisor and maybe give financial advice to some of you guys in the room. But part of that process was doing a lot of face-to-face role plays. And when COVID happened, it meant that a lot of those were happening virtually. And I'd probably say even face-to-face role plays, no one really particularly enjoys them. But I think the other thing that was really clear was that it's really inconsistent as an experience for people. Some people are weird and love role-playing and just are the most extroverted characters that you can imagine. And some people are more introverted, like me, who would absolutely hate doing something like this. Anyway, but what we did was then actually look at how we could bring in XR and virtual reality to actually address this. But so starting off, we went quite big, if I'm honest, and I'm going to come on to why maybe upon reflection, maybe we would have not started quite so big. But we bought 300 Quest 2 headsets, I believe at the time. This was back in 2021. And then we started actually looking at, okay, we want to design a role-play experience that will allow these financial advisors to be able to practice having client meetings, but in the comfort of their own home, and actually get a chance to really sort of practice some of the really niggly things that come up in a challenging client conversation, so that then they're a bit more prepared when it comes to meeting real clients in their day-to-day life.
So that's where you guys started big, knew the gap you wanted to fill, and you started to get it out there. And then I'm curious, like in those very early days, we've all experienced this. Anybody in this room that's run their own XR program or helped others with solutions, we've all seen this at the beginning, the stumbling blocks. But I'm curious, what were the first like stumbling blocks out of the gate? You said you wish you might not have started that big at go. What was it you ran into? What were like some of those obstacles?
Well, I think what I'd say is the whole process of building it was quite intensive. So not only did we buy so many headsets, but we actually went with building a completely bespoke solution first. And that was our first engagement. And just to clarify, we had no experience in virtual reality before this, any sort of development of this kind of scope or this kind of technology. How do we make the most of it? So one of the biggest challenges we had was just almost being too excited about what you could do and not actually thinking about what we should be doing. So I'm sure we're all familiar with scope creep, how you can start off with a really fundamental goal, and then before you know it, it's grown arms and legs, and it's just completely turned into something else. But what it ended up happening is that we ended up creating quite a bloated training experience that really was like quite, I don't want to, it didn't really focus in on the needs of what we were trying to solve because we were just getting so excited about what we could do with the technology. So yeah, I'd probably say the part that I think starting big was really an issue was less with the amount of headsets that we bought, but more with our approach of going, let's jump straight into a bespoke solution to start with. And I guess one of the reasons why I think that is vital is that you do get to learn some of the mistakes with delivering VR. I mean, it's one thing actually creating the content and making it a good user experience, which, can I just say, 4 or 5 years ago, the user experience for learning content in XR was not great, entirely honest. But I think that would have been really helpful to know how we could come around and navigate those challenges if we started with something like a buy solution, just going for a small sort of pilot, maybe testing something that you can buy off the shelf with a small number of users to really learn. Because I think that was one of the things that came up was we ultimately built a piece that was built within 6 months, but we had actually retired it after 18 months because the actual user journey was just not effective, and it meant that we weren't really getting the adoption that we wanted to get for that piece of training. So it was an expensive first mistake, I want to say, but we learned a lot from it, and I am going to talk a little bit about that as well.
And that's so first though is it sounds like and then Josh said like the kind of the magic word that we think about a lot at Arbor, which is adoption. How do you actually get people to put it on and use it, and how do you move past the initial objections? And then from the L&D side is where Josh was looking at this from, where they started really broad and they were like, let's just do it, let's go ham, let's have fun with the tech. And so I am curious, before you get into, I think the way to jump into like some of the ways that you moved through it, what is it that like you're starting today? There's maybe some people in the audience that are starting programs today, or they've started programs and they have hit those early failures. What is it you wish you would have been told? Or like if you could go back now and tell yourself something a few years ago, what would it be? And then I want you to use that and then talk through with them some of the ways that you kind of navigated through and what you actually accomplished.
Yeah, so I said a bit about how we had a bit of a clearer understanding of what the problem was to begin with. So for me, it's almost like before we even start talking about what kind of solution we want to go for, what is the actual problem that we're trying to solve? And I think quite often, and it's a thing across L&D, I would say generally, is that we're very reliant on NPS scores and sentiment, and they're not necessarily, they don't correlate to business impact and business value. So when you're trying to, I think one of the challenges we had with adoption was how do we actually demonstrate the value of what we're delivering here? So ultimately, if we're not looking to actually move a business critical metric in the right direction, that's going to be quite challenging to get buy-in then from people across the business, because we're not able to evidence the value. So that's one thing I'd say when you're starting with a problem, focus on that. But then it was also sort of going into it. It's almost like, what do you want to do in VR and what do you not want to do? And I think it's when it comes to some of the strengths, I wish I understood a bit more what makes sense in VR and what doesn't. I'm sure, I'm going to bring up a bit of a silly example, but you're not going to want to do an Excel masterclass in virtual reality. There's certain use cases where it just doesn't make sense at all. However, the things that involve high-pressure scenarios, the emotional connection, that was something I really kind of wish I knew starting off with, was that real sort of, how do we kind of capitalize on that being a really big driver for behavioral change. And I think this probably actually links into a little bit of like how you actually really make things land, is also not just the data, but also understanding that behavior drives, emotions drive behavioral change far more than logic does. And that's something we definitely noticed with one of our later VR deliveries. But then when it comes to, I guess, the actual content itself, like I say, really small. It needs to be something that you're not creating a really intense, long experience as well. One of the things we actually did was create a training piece that lasted over an hour. And that, I would say, wasn't a good use of people's time in virtual reality. It's better in sort of shorter, more intense sprints. And I'm going to use an example from the CEO of Body Swaps. When I spoke to him recently, he said it's kind of like being on a roller coaster, and that it's really intense and really good and really impactful, but it's something that it can be quite fatiguing if it goes on for too long. You kind of want it to be short, sharp, and sweet. So yeah, maximum learning impact in a minimal learning footprint is really what you need to aim for with VR.
That's great. That's great. So with that, I want you to go ahead. Let's talk a little bit about what you all did, what you actually created. Talk a little bit about the use case. I think Josh has a couple of use cases that are really interesting that they dove into. One specifically, I think it's really interesting for me just personally because of the kind of the emotional ties. And then I think it'd be really good. I mean, we only have a few more minutes with you all, but just to kind of give an idea, I want you to talk to those use cases and then talk about like, how did you actually build it and get it out to the people? Because you guys had some really great impact. You found that kind of adoption. Obviously, it's an ongoing battle. But what were the actual pieces that you put in place, and then what was it you delivered?
Okay. I'm going to talk about a vulnerability project that I delivered back in 2024. So just background for this, we have a regulatory body in the UK called the Financial Conduct Authority. I'm not about to go into boring regulatory stuff with you here, but they said that out of a demographic of UK working age adults, about 40% of them are facing some sort of vulnerability, have some sort of characteristic. When we looked at the data for our own clients, it was sitting at 11%. So there was a really huge gap. It carried moral ethical, regulatory implications. And so, I needed to work on something to actually close that gap. And I think the fact that then we had a really clear strategic objective, that was then something that I could look at how we can make sure that everything we were building actually came back to, is it going to tangibly change this? And I'm going to be completely honest, this was one of the things that was quite difficult because when I was speaking a lot with some of the financial advisors, again, it's like so important doing some of this groundwork sort of consultancy to really understand what is the root cause of this challenge, why aren't we seeing this? And some of it was attitudinal. They were like, oh, my clients, they're not vulnerable. And so that was from some of them. And then we get others that just don't understand how to actually bring it up with their clients and feeling quite nervous about. No one wants to be told they're vulnerable, do they? And it's kind of how do you have that sort of sensitive conversation? So yeah, when it came to actually building the content, I decided to then lead in with a two-part solution to capture both of those needs. So the first part was actually looking at your, how do we drive that behavioral change? What's the motivation? Why do we want people to really feel like, oh gosh, I've got a personal stake in really helping my clients because I don't want them to experience what happens if they don't get that support. And so we created a 360 film that kind of really brought that to life. And then we actually then created another part, which was actually all the soft skills around it. How do you kind of bring it up in a delicate but assertive way to make sure that they really understand that this is something that they need to think about, and we put some support in place for them. But yeah, so the build part was great because we actually worked with again ArborXR. We do all the kind of management of our sort of headsets and delivery from them, but then we actually worked with a few other external clients to do sort of 360 video capture and all of that. So all stuff I'd say it's quite exciting stuff to be getting involved in. But then what happened is when we actually got to delivering this, we piloted it with one of the partnerships. So one of our group of advisors that were kind of most in need had the lowest metrics on this. And they got a 19% increase in the number of their clients they had recorded as vulnerable post-training compared to before, sorry. But then I think the important thing is that's not just then the number, that's more people that are now getting the support that they need because of the training that we delivered for those people. So I think that was something that we could really be quite proud and excited about.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So in the spirit of time, I'm gonna try to hit some of these key points. But I think that if you all walk away, and it depends on what you all are here for, but if you're trying to figure out exactly like getting in Josh's mind and his team's mind, they definitely went broad. Josh has been kind of the person that can continuously beat the drum of like starting a little smaller, but starting with adoption in mind. Like, how do you actually get it out there? The systems that are in place, the unsexy stuff does have to be there. That was a lot of stuff that Josh did on the background, and his team.
If I can quickly, so one of the things we did do was look at how we could broaden it out to more people and make it more accessible, break down those barriers. So I worked on some virtual reality hubs. So they were just little hubs in our offices across the country, so that people could actually they don't have to book in, they just have a headset there that's available. They've got a screen that gives them all the information about how to get started, and their headsets, they're just on charging docks, ready to go. And it was actually one of the ways in which ArborXR specifically was quite useful. Like, I don't want to say quite useful, that's really underselling it, but we ultimately had to understand, where are people engaging on these VR headsets, like what locations, what are they going into, how long are they going into them for, and always getting a bit of a heat map of what is being engaged with at those times. And I guess then what we wanted to do was look at, okay, how do we make decisions based on that data? So is it moving the headsets into different locations to drum up more footfall? And some of it was actually looking at some of the apps and then making more personalized learning journeys in all the different locations based on what content that they were more interested in those locations. And then having sort of really clear call to actions, like, a big sort of digital screen that said, come practice your presentation skills, or manage a difficult conversation with a colleague, so you can manage those negotiations and those conflicts, and really sort of look at the data of what kind of training do people say that they're looking for, and then making that something that we really make a big song and dance about in those hubs. And we actually had it so that I think about over 500 sessions were had across our hubs in 2024. So it clearly drove a lot of interest, but then actually led a lot of people to booking into workshops, to kind of actually taking headsets home. So we had a whole loan process where we could actually send those headsets out to people. And again, that was really helpful because we could start chasing down people. And I quite liked your IP address sort of thing, where you can see if someone's still got it at home and you're like, come on, bring it back. And it was really helpful for us, like actually making that a success for sure.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so to close here, I'll say this is Josh has done this for a really long time. He can't say these things about himself because it would make him sound very egotistical. But Josh is very good at what he does. He's worked in L&D for quite some time, and I will say from our perspective, looking at SJP, Arbor's been able to work with a lot of companies, a lot of organizations. We've been very lucky to kind of be the background in a lot of deployments and see it. I'll say Josh had a very sticky, kind of gummy organization he had to work through. I don't know if you know much about the sector that SJP is in. It's not one that is apt to change very quickly. So if you all are interested to talk to somebody like Josh, please track him down. He's going to be here this week, running around. You guys will see him. He's hard to miss with the lovely head of hair that he has. Find him, talk to him about if you have any questions about like the way that they did it. There's obviously a lot more minutia than this. Myself and a few of my teammates from ArborXR are also here this week. If you want to learn more about XR device management, just talk about the ecosystem in general that we work in, or learn about some of the data and analytics stuff that we have started to kick up this year that is new for us, we'd love to chat too. So find us after this. You've got a long day of talks that will be lovely, I'm sure, and hopefully you all were able to pull some from this. So please give Josh a hand. We appreciate you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you.